Rubik's Cube may seem easy when one is in a position to see the colors and analyze it for a few seconds. However, can you imagine what it is like for someone who does not have the gift of sight? Does it mean that such individuals can't enjoy cubing? What are the barriers faced by the visually impaired? And what can be done to solve those issues? How can I be a part of the solution rather than being a part of the problem? These were some of the questions that crossed my mind back when I was in sixth. At that time, there were no cubing competitions being organized in Pune. Only bigger metros like Mumbai, Delhi, and sometimes Kolkata were preferred locations. However, traveling to participate in these competitions was time consuming and expensive. So, with the help of my parents and the support of my local corporator, we organized the first ever World Cubing Association recognized event in Pune in 2018. It was a huge hit. We had 38 participants who had come from cities like Mumbai, Nashik, and Solapur. It was all due to word of mouth publicity since we didn't have the budget for advertising. Thereafter, I organized six national and international competitions in which more than 600 kids have participated, one of them being the Indian Nationals held in May 2017, which featured about 247 participants. Ironically, there's an event known as blindfold in regular cubing competitions, where sighted people take part in it. They take a look at a scrambled cube, they blindfold themselves, and solve the cube. However, this event is obviously not meant for visually challenged people, despite being called blindfold. I decided to go and figure out how I could fix this and visited the Pune School for the Blind in order to research. That day changed me. I had the good fortune of meeting two really bright sparks who broke all my preconceived notions. These two students were partially blind. However, they were very fast learners and had a highly evolved tactile sense. They comprehend complex instructions and had a very positive and cheerful demeanor. I also found out that although they came from economically challenged circumstances, they wanted to carve out a solid career path for themselves. According to the World Health Organization, there are about 2.2 billion people in the world that have a near or distance vision impairment. I did some research and found out that India is home to about 1.6 million blind children, according to the Economic Times, which is the largest amongst all developing countries. Last year, during COVID, I was given the opportunity to teach three completely blind children. They were my age and were really interested in learning. However, the situation was different. Due to the challenges imposed due to COVID, I had to teach them online. Things that interested them, such as videos about animals, was something that they kept messaging me with. And they kept on sharing topics and videos about doubts that they had and queries they wanted to ask me. And I found that they were not only exceptionally talented and optimistic in picking up new instructions, but they never complained about their dire circumstances. I also realized that there was a paucity of puzzles and toys catering to the visually impaired, which hampered their learning in subjects like math and geometry. They needed a conducive learning environment at home and in school, but due to financial challenges, such an environment was seldom available. Things like access to a stable internet connection or a working device like a computer or mobile phone was a huge challenge. By this time, I had a greater clarity about the barriers faced by the visually impaired in learning the Rubik's Cube, such as the lack of awareness about the Rubik's Cube and its suitability to the visually impaired, the absence of an affordable Braille cube, which is designed exclusively for these visually impaired people, a lack of teachers and training materials suited to the visually impaired, the high cost of Braille content and scarcity of Braille printers, and the absence of an inclusive approach, which is prevalent in our society because blind lives matter. In early 2021, just before the second wave of COVID had ravaged India, I contacted 10 blind schools across the country to validate my experience. All of them were closed due to COVID, but one school located on the outskirts of Pune agreed to give me an opportunity to test my ideas. I was able to go and learn the Braille cell and its use, interact with visually impaired volunteers, and get a chance to interact with very experienced staff members. Based on this fieldwork and past experiences, I was able to do the following. Firstly, I learned how to solve a cube marketed as the blind cube, blindfolded. When I did that, I realized that the embossed dots on the surface of the cube weren't very pronounced, which made it very hard to decipher some combinations. Secondly, the dot spacing was not Braille compliant. Thereafter, I used my experience to develop a Braille manual, which can be used by the visually impaired. I had to spend several hours thinking about the steps a visually impaired person would take and the simplest way to make them possible. Finding a Braille printer was a huge challenge due to the lockdown. I'm based in Pune, which has been the worst affected city in India due to COVID, and everything was shut due to continuous lockdowns. It was very hard to even get a phone call answered. However, I persevered and then I lucked out. With the help of my parents, I found a Braille printing place about 50 kilometers outside my city and went there and got my manual printed. Not only that, but they were kind enough to allow us to test our manual and some of the combinations of Braille symbols I had conceptualized. Braille cubes are expensive. The blind cube online costs about 1300 rupees, whereas the Braille cube overseas costs 45 euros, which is 4050 Indian rupees. By using an existing refurbished cube and printing and stickering selected symbols, the cost of my cube can be brought down to about 150 rupees. My solution involves the identification of symbols that are easy to recognize by the visually impaired people. And methodology. My design has a low carbon impact and can be prepared without any major investment. It can also generate livelihoods as the visually impaired can be trained to print the stickers. There is no point in harming the environment and generating more plastic. Reusing existing cubes can help divert plastic from reaching landfills. If refurbished cubes aren't available, new cheap cubes can be bought and modified. I wanted to develop a complete solution that could empower the visually impaired, allow them to enjoy this as much as I did, and enable a self-paced and peer-to-peer learning experience. A lot more is needed, and this is just a small beginning. Scaling up this solution will require some funding, and securing it is the next challenge. Similarly, building a corps of interested volunteers who can expand this initiative is also something I'm eagerly looking forward to. Right now, my sister and I have been collaborating with blind volunteers, but it's not an easy task. But what is life without a challenge, right? Hopefully, going forward, we'll be able to take our work further in the near future and achieve all that we've set to achieve. Thank you.